I'm going to talk about Chinese e-commerce that started to really take off. We had a huge marketing blitz in Nigeria this year from Temu. Kobus, in South Africa, Chinese e-commerce giants Temu and also Shein have caused a lot of excitement, but also a lot of concern about the flooding of the market with $20 skirts that are coming in without paying any duties. The South African government initiated a response, a tariff response to imports that are valued less than, I think it was $43. They never went through with that as far as I know. Now Temu is starting to come up in other parts of Africa as well. This is exciting for people who have very minimal disposable income because their dollars go a lot farther, but at the same time, it poses an existential risk to indigenous small and medium-sized enterprises that cannot compete against the China price. In Addis Ababa at Bole International Airport, there is a brand new fulfillment center that was built by Cainiao. Cainiao is the logistics arm of Alibaba that was built in partnership with Ethiopian Airlines to facilitate the goods coming in from China that then can be distributed across Ethiopian Airlines' network to deliver goods very fast. We're seeing this here in Southeast Asia in a very big way. The pushback is beginning. There are tariffs that are starting to come up around the world against Chinese products, but it is something that I think we're going to see a lot next year in Africa is the rise of Chinese e-commerce. Are you guys seeing that in your countries? Giro, let's start with you first.
Yes, I'm seeing that taking form here in Mauritius as well, where the Mauritian government is also trying to be imposing tariffs on Chinese imported, especially textile product, much more tablecloths and all those kind of product, where they've tried to preserve, to protect a bit of local industry here. But this local industry being also held by Indian or Indian descendant, you kind of have now the mix of the trading, commercial, and also the geopolitics agenda playing into the Mauritian government logic behind how they're approaching those logistic business. But yes, we see the expansion of the commercial footprint here in Mauritius, not only in Mauritius, but also in countries like in many sub-Saharan African countries where, as you say, they're offering affordable options, allowing customers to have good product instead of being stuck with the high-end prices they have with local manufacturers. So we're going to have to see how now governments are going to balance the demand for the local consumers at the same time with what we're going to see with those tariffs putting in place. But for me, those tariffs will only encourage somehow or even maybe boost illegal trading in a way that people are going now to go to China and buy those stuff and bring them as just like their personal items and going just to people going find a way to keep on buying them and selling them in a certain way.
That's right. So you can announce all the tariffs you want, but if your state capacity is not strong enough to enforce the tariffs, whether it's being brought back by individuals or just getting passed through customs by paying off people, then you have a problem. Kobus, Mexico announced a 35% tariffs on certain textiles, I think something like 40 or 50 categories of textiles. They didn't name the Chinese specifically, but I think we all know who they're targeting with something like that. South Africa, again, started to go down the path of putting tariffs on these low-cost imports. They haven't done it yet. Do you feel that that's something that they're going to circle back to later this year? Because it does pose a threat to small businesses in South Africa.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think some of that impact was already felt, I think, in South Africa before, because a few years ago, there was a big wave of Chinese imports, which ended up in some of the kind of low-end, like more affordable, kind of garment sectors in South Africa. And that pushed a lot of local people out of work. In South Africa, it's an interesting, complicated mix. So Temu launched in South Africa. It's very popular. It's popular in my own house. Like, my mother loves Temu, like, among others, because she's a big crafter, and it has a whole thousands of products that are just not available in the South African market. All kinds of like zips with patterns cut into them, all kinds of.
How long does it take for her from the time that she presses buy to the time it delivers? How long does that take? Do you know?
A week.
Really?
10 days max, I think. Yeah.
Wow, that's fast.
Yeah.
Wow.
So on the one hand, that's happening. So it offers a bunch of stuff that South Africans don't have access to in the market anyway, and that is not produced in South Africa. So at the same time, Amazon also launched in South Africa this year after, a long time. And it's actually comparing Amazon to Temu is actually interesting because Amazon is so much more overpriced. It's crazy. It's not only that Temu is cheap. I think Amazon is more expensive than South African competitors. And I'm not 100% sure why that is. But Amazon Amazon's launch in South Africa has actually been quite underwhelming. And then at the same time, there's an interesting what I'm seeing in Cape Town. Cape Town is traditionally one of the big garment centers in South Africa. And now that I'm living there, there's this interesting move back to local production by South African supermarkets. So a lot of the supermarkets and kind of like, again, low-end clothing stores have moved away from Chinese stuff and other kind of imported like places from like Mauritius, Bangladesh and so on. And they're actually now trumpeting the fact that they're producing in South Africa. And at the same time, there's a whole bunch of like, in Cape Town, there's a whole bunch of micro labels kind of popping up with little embedded workshops of people. So there's a kind of a counter trend to Temu, I think, because South African fashion industry is moving up quite rapidly. Like some South African designers have been showing in Paris, for example, have been doing collabs with like Adidas. So the South African high-end fashion scene is booming. And Africa is one of the last emerging fashion markets, like luxury markets in the world. So Louis Vuitton and so on have set up in South Africa in the past already. So all of this is happening at the same time. So it's quite a kind of a complicated mix of things in South Africa. But Temu is definitely in there.
But isn't that the ultimate dream and the fantasy of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, is that South Africans will be selling to Nigerians and to Botswanans clothes, but the logistics are the key question. Getting the products there affordably in under a week is something that I think is very difficult within intercontinental trade in Africa. I mean, it's faster to come from China.
Yeah. And I mean, it's because of all of the problems with rail lines and so on, yeah.
Right. And to go from South Africa to Nigeria is going to take longer than it is to come from China to South Africa.